Well, now we are having our compliance panel where we will hear from leaders in tech how they keep innovating while staying compliant and protecting their data. So I'm gonna ask our panelists, so please come up on stage, James, Kali, and Gary. And let's get this discussion started. Okay, so we know that data privacy regulations can be a pain in business. And the need to get the data protected can many times slow down software development. So what we are going to hear from these leaders is that how they are overcoming these challenges on getting the data protected without compromising the need to speed up innovation and enable access to good data. So I will ask now the panelists to introduce yourselves, please, and give us a background of your expertise and experience around this area.
Okay. I think it's still morning, right? Good morning, everyone. I am Gary Awa. I'm the CTO from Molina Healthcare. Molina Healthcare is a payer side of healthcare, to give you context of the space we play, and essentially the insurance side. So I've been with Molina just over 2 years. Essentially, as part of my responsibility, actually includes our security operations as well as our architecture components, along with the infrastructure side. So the scope and span of my responsibility actually leads a lot to some of these exact topics that you're referring to today. Not only from a compliance standpoint, in fact, I would say, I wouldn't use the word it's a pain. We have no choice, right? We have no choice. It's part of our role to protect your healthcare data, for those of you who are members of Molina Healthcare. So it is actually part of the way of doing business. And we constantly are on the, continue to invest in these particular areas to ensure the data is secure. And in fact, most of my time and energy is actually spent in the security space as we are moving towards the cloud. So I'll begin there, and I'll talk later on about other perspectives that we didn't hear from the previous speakers.
Thank you, Gary.
Good morning. I'm James Beeson. I'm the global CISO for Cigna. Probably most people know the brand, but we kind of have two big giant businesses. We've kind of got the insurance, which I know we're not supposed to use that word. It's like a 4-letter word. We've got the insurance side of the business, and then we've got the health services side of the business. I run the cybersecurity program for them. We'll do close to $200 billion, so we're a very large and complex business. But looking forward to the discussion this morning.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks, James. Kali Durgampudi, I'm Chief Technology Officer of Zellis. Zellis is in the claims adjudication, payments, and member empowerment business. We're about $1.5 billion. My background, I'm software engineering background, grew up in technology, have been here for about 3 years, and I lead all technology that includes IT, R&D, InfoSec, and DevOps aspects as well. And yeah, I mean, it's an honor actually to be part of the panel and to talk about compliance and privacy and what we're doing on, especially in the chief technology office world. We have to move fast from an innovation standpoint, but today we actually get slowed down by a lot of other things that are happening, and so we have to be compliant. And so this is actually a great topic to talk about.
Thank you, Kelly. So let's get it started. I will kick it off with a question to you, Gary. Okay, so with all the economic uncertainty going on, so how compliance and data protection, we know that compliance and data protection is a hot topic, right? So how are you and your industry peers are handling these issues, considering the economic situation that we're facing?
In my particular area, we do not see a slowdown in investments And in fact, where we sit in the particular market segment, we're actually seeing an increase in terms of the investments we're making in this area. Our business is on a high growth curve. We're working specifically in the Medicaid market. That's our primarily business in over 20 states. So we are on, I would say, high energy implementation plans to bring on new members into our business. So what's that mean? Not only are we winning these RFPs in states, but also we're also having acquisitions. So acquisitions is a big part of this. And so from a compliance standpoint and from a security standpoint, we have to have a lot of processes in place to look at secure endpoints, for example, understand what our application suites needs to be ready to bring on certain membership. And so what's that entail? It actually, exactly what was been talked about previously around DevOps, moving faster, creating the testing environments, ensuring that we are fully compliant. Now, we are almost 100% in the cloud. So I would say by the end of the summer, we will have no data centers, right? So what's that implication means? Implications is that by being in the cloud, we actually know our cost, right? For example, and we found out in terms of from a data standpoint, the data actually is a huge percentage of our cost infrastructure. In fact, when we migrated some of our data centers into the cloud, we also understood there's data there that no one's been looking at for a while. In fact, we actually revised with our compliance team, revised our data archiving policy, or data backup policy. Because what we've noticed is that our spread has become so wide, it's costing us a lot of money. And more importantly, we need to reduce I would call the attack surface. From a security standpoint, we're actually beginning now to reduce the amount of data spread that we have. We are, as I said, we looked at our archiving policies, and actually we're eliminating data. We're actually eliminating data in certain aspects of our business. And so from a security standpoint, that's actually make a significant difference. It's actually looking at ways in how we actually can reduce costs. Now, we are now with 100%, almost 100% in the cloud. We're driving now to more cloud-native capabilities. So that means then we have to have more cloud-native security products, as well as, so that's a big piece that we're looking on right now, because many of our product suite is not as cloud native. The other aspects of this too is around our cybersecurity as well as our DR capabilities. And so we're looking at ways how we can do that much quicker, how we can air gap from a cybersecurity standpoint, how we could bring our systems up fairly quickly. We have a goal of getting those systems up within less than 72 hours. Actually, we're beating some of those goals in terms from a recovery standpoint. So we need to have those capabilities in place, and our DR as well from a DR standpoint. How fast can we continue to scale and make sure that we meet our DR goals for system uptime?
Yeah. And James, what do you think about it? I mean, how do you see investments in this area? Slowing it down, or totally the opposite, as Gary said?
I definitely am on board with Gary here. They're not slowing down, I don't think. I mean, everybody's a little nervous about the economy. There's a lot of stuff going on in the economy. But at the end of the day, I mean, no one can afford to have some sort of data issue. I mean, Eric touched on it, Catherine touched on it, Jed touched on it. It's a huge problem. I mean, the data, I read a stat the other day that said they're expecting an order of magnitude of growth in data between 2010 and, between 2020 and 2030. They're expecting another order of magnitude of growth, right? So data is a huge deal. Of course, I'm probably the twisted, paranoid security guy up here on the stage this afternoon. So anything you can do to reduce the data footprint can make a huge difference, right? I mean, we've seen the cost associated with these large breaches somewhere, in some cases, north of $1 billion. In fact, I read this morning that the issue with the insurance company and Merck, had been this argument since NotPetya from 6 years ago, and that they did settle, and the courts decided that the insurance company had to pay. I actually saw that as a positive from a security guy, but as a negative from the insurance guy, because that means you have to pay for the insurance guy. But I think we're definitely going to continue to pay.
And,
cyber insurance is different than health insurance.
Yeah, that's
We're
true.
good.
That's true. That's a good point.
and Kali, translating it to numbers, how do you see the ROI of it?
Yeah, so numbers-wise, we're, Zealous, for example, is sitting on 15 petabytes of data. We are doing 1 billion transactions a day. And we used to process just about, a few years ago, we used to process about $50 million worth of payments. Like almost a year, we're processing $80 billion of payments in a matter of a few years. So think about the scale of what that is happening. And so from an ROI standpoint, we've quadrupled our spend on security and compliance and privacy aspects of it. And how do we measure that ROI? Is reduction of risks, obviously from a risk roster, risk compliance standpoint. Surely by actually every day there's no incident. That's another big measure, obviously, especially these days as it's growing. And also now from a speed and technology standpoint, so I'm in a unique place where CISO and CTOs all report up to me. So then how do you balance the innovation and compliance, fast track? So from a development standpoint, we've been able to fast track development of, I think we called like 300 releases in the last year. That means that we've quadrupled the amount of releases that we've done. So those are all the ROI metrics that are coming out of it. So investment has grown, transactions have grown, data has grown, but releases are also growing, and that means testing and automation have grown. Our test automation cases have went from, in some departments, test automation cases gone from 0 to 10,000. So those are all the ROI aspects of it, and that's exactly how we were able to deliver what we were able to deliver. Zealous has tripled in the last 3 years, roughly speaking, 3-4 years, from a growth standpoint, and so all of this has to be. So our jobs are only getting difficult in terms of more complexity, but also more need for more innovation, and that's the ROI. So when you release, when you do all of this stuff, that's the ROI of the measurement.
Hey, James, we talked about DevSecOps, right, and how it's important to have accountability of data. Mm-hmm. So in your case, not only for the 400 plus people you have in cybersecurity in your team, but thinking about the 22,000 people you have in tech in your organization. Mm-hmm. So could you share with us the learnings around that?
Sure. So a couple things we have, and those are close numbers. I'm sure I probably gave bad data when we were practicing this, but we've got almost 1,000 people in doing security work within Cigna. By the way, we've got about 100,000 workers, about 75,000 employees, and we've got about 22,000, as you mentioned, technology people. But I say this all the time, and I thought Eric did a good job this morning too. The tiny team of 1,000 people cannot possibly do all the security for the company. It's as simple as that. Security is everyone's responsibility. I know that's the oldest tagline in the world, but it's becoming more and more the case as the amount of data builds and the access to information builds. And Eric mentioned this morning, and I couldn't agree more, I think, what did he say, 92%? Or 8% is technology and 92% is a cultural change, right? And so that is the challenge today, we've got to create a cyber savvy workforce. That's the term I use all the time. And that is a constant thing. We're constantly going to have to continue to teach people how to be smarter about security, right? And there's no easy way to do that because the threat landscape is changing all the time. But the reality is it's a cultural shift and you've got to get people on board with it. The two things that I say that have worked pretty well over my history is gamify and make it personal, right? So what we have found to be effective is when you start talking to somebody about, hey, come learn how to protect your 85-year-old grandmother's information or your 12-year-old daughter's information. You know what? People get interested all of a sudden and you get them engaged. And then you can take them down this path of, hey, by the way, Cigna's got all this data, and it's really important too, and it belongs to somebody's 85-year-old grandmother, so you can help us protect that. So making it personal, I think, can make a big difference. It can get you better engagement. And then the second word I use is gamify, so make it competitive. We have a multitude of CIOs across our business units, and so of course, I've got the old rack and stack chart that I show to the big boss and say, look at this. This person didn't do nearly as well with their data protection as this other person, just as an example. So if you gamify it, it can also really help to begin to drive the cultural change that you need.
Well, we talk a lot about DevOps, right? I'm pretty sure that James, as a security guy, is super interested and gave us an awesome strategy here to add the sec under DevSecOps, right?
I constantly am correcting everybody to say DevSecOps.
Yeah, don't forget the sec.
Don't forget
sure.
the security piece. That's
and
right.
Kylie, what are your perspectives around it? So what was the strategy you guys use it?
Yeah, I have a very unique seat in that spot because the three divisional CTOs and the CISO and the CIO all report into me. You should see some of these meetings. It's fascinating. There's interesting conversations that happen because on one hand, the CTOs are eager to like basically develop and innovate, whereas security and data protection takes this big stage, and and there's like almost like the CIO, the CISO are on both ends. In between the CTO and between are the CTOs, and there's this tug of war that's constantly going on from a DevSecOps standpoint. How we've been able to challenge is exactly that in terms of, as fascinating as, I made fun of it, but that exact composition makes it for a true, innovative, secure environment. Because now security, compliance, privacy, data protection are all part of the lexicon that we're doing. So we're doing, so the two strategies that we use is we use something called the Information Security Steering Committee as part of the Agile Scrum process. So basically that means that the DevSecOps aspects of it are coming up right at the time of requirements, and so we have security requirements built in, data requirements built in right in the epics and the Agile process in the beginning, and every tool that we purchase, every new data thing that we have to do inside the company actually goes through a quick architectural review board. The architectural review board is now comprising of all these constituents. So traditionally, architectural review board consisted of technologies, so not maybe security and the IT, but actually having all of these together, makes it like, as it's called, it's a team sport. It's the cultural shift, it's a mind shift, but the lexicon is now there, and so now everybody thinks about it automatically. So there's no forcing function in terms of, hey, DevOps versus DevSecOps. It's actually one smooth function that goes from the CISO to the CIO to the CTOs. The innovation team is in the middle, the process team is in the middle, so we're all one big happy team family, so to speak.
Happy most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. I mean, the arguments are unreal. Like those we have to save for the cocktail hour, but otherwise.
Okay, so Gary, in one of the conversations we had, you mentioned that you have been using chaos engineering to level up security measures, right? So share a little bit more with us about it.
Yes, we're in the early stages of applying some chaos engineering theory to apply to our resiliency across our platforms. And exactly what we're doing is taking our systems, our runtime systems, and breaking them into components and really understanding kind of what those weak points are, and actually we're actually breaking them. So in terms of like our API environments, what if our API environment actually went down? What's the impact of that? And actually we're finding some weaknesses as we scale up. We're finding some weaknesses on our infrastructure in some of our application suite in terms of how all these components are linked together, in terms of what other systems they're interacting with. If we're missing a piece and that piece fails, how can we really restore that piece fairly quickly? So looking at the stack for each of our critical applications and trying to break it apart, and actually we're going to get to a dashboard where I actually can come up and actually break it in production. And so we're trying to get to that point whereby it's really about driving resiliency in our entire stack. And so what is also exposing is some of the security aspects of that in terms of how we're doing designing our containers, in terms of how we've done sort of the workload protections in that particular area. So we're discovering some interesting things against our old stack, against all the various components where we have some weaknesses, where there might be an apogee. Why is the apogee not running in that particular zone, for example? How did not fail over appropriately? So we're finding some, I would say, some learnings out of this that would help us continue to scale and continue to, I would say, drive 24/7 operations. So that's really what the goal is, and making sure that some of those actually comes into our cybersecurity air-gapped environments, because we're finding there's some potentially engineering gaps in some areas that we're fixing very quickly. So we're learning a lot from this. The team is actually creating a lot more knowledge about how to recover systems in whatever the situation might be, whether it's from a DR standpoint or whether that's from a cybersecurity standpoint. It's actually a very intellectual and interesting exercise. We've got a lot of our core talent working on this to understand, really understand, and re-architect some components that perhaps have some weaknesses in it.
Got to be prepared, right?
Yeah, that's what we are trying to do. Now, and more importantly, is building a muscle memory of how do you fail over, right? And but more also from a cybersecurity standpoint, how do you really build it up quickly? Because in times of crisis, we got to make sure that we know how to do this, and not looking for information, trying to find someone. So we're really looking at building that muscle memory, and then also driving complete automation. So we're automating all of these environments, taking all those PowerShell scripts and really automating them. So we can press a button, we can actually make this all come together.
Do once, do twice,
Yes.
automate.
Yes.
That's it, that's the spirit.
Infrastructure as code, right? I see.
Okay, so Delphix is a global company, and we do business with also global companies. So James, we know that compliance can be very specific to each country we operate, right? Mm-hmm. So you have operation in more than 30 countries, correct?
Yes.
So how do you deal with that complexity, and how Delphix is supporting you on making algorithms and strategies flexible to address those particularities in each country?
Sure. Well, there's no easy answer to how do you keep up with the ever-changing complexity of new compliance rules, right? I mean, I think it was Brett Arsenault from Microsoft, the Microsoft guy has my job at Microsoft, that said that he saw statistics somewhere that there's like 15 new regulations related to privacy or data protection every day globally. Wow. 15 new ones, right? So it's almost impossible to keep up with. My view is pretty simple though. You want to try to keep a centralized database following a centralized kind of a framework. We use NIST and ISO, which are very common frameworks, to just help you understand where all these different complexities are from a data compliance perspective. And most of them are basic stuff, so there's no simple way to understand what's happening across 30 different countries. But at the end of the day, there's two things that you can do. One is you can sort of follow the sun, as I like to think about it, because of course what history shows us is a lot of the harder or more difficult privacy and data protection and compliance regulations start in Europe. A lot of those start in Europe, and then they sort of make their way over into the United States typically. California tends to be out on the starting edge of that, and we've seen some of that like CCPA, et cetera. And then, Latin America and Asia kind of bring up the rear to some degree in that. But you do get a sense for what's coming, and I think if you use that follow the sun thinking to see what's likely coming, then it gives you a better understanding of what you can expect. At the end of the day, the thing that's changing is the whole world is trying to give people, individuals, more control over their data. And it's easy to say that, but if you think about the ramifications of that over a long haul, it's difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
I'll stop there. So.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add to that, so we would not have been able to go global without technology and Delphix. So today we are not allowed to operate. Our view let alone operate or view, let alone move the data, let alone, we cannot even view the data, actual data outside of the United States. And so the only way we do it is through Delphix. We mask all the lower environments, and we are actually able to do, I have 150 technology people that are working in a global center right now just because of what we are able to do with Delphix. Quick, easy copies, masked, no compliance issues, no issues. In general, by the way, apart from, James and I were talking about it, apart from the compliance issues, I think it's becoming better and good hygiene where you need to, where it's not just the need aspect of it, but as a practice, mask it and copy it, and less number of copies and more masking actually protects you in general, right? So it actually is.
I'm all about less data. The less data, the better, and that's one big partnership that Delphix can really help you with, is just better understanding where you have duplication to minimize that, and less data, less exposure at the end of the day, and less expensive fines when you have an issue, if you have an issue.
And more masking.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so the title of our panel here is Compliance That Pays. We're going to end up talking about, and Callie, I want you to join me on that. We're going to end up talking about the value of compliance, right? So how do you share the value of compliance internally to your organization so you can get investments around it? So how is the talk about compliance?
I mean, for us, it's actually, as James said, it becomes easier because we're in healthcare, we're sitting on 15 petabytes of data. It is personal. Our own information is actually in the databases that we talk about. So when we talk about PHI access and things like that, we have to follow HIPAA on our own employees' data, right? So it becomes more personal, it becomes more sticky, it becomes understandable. And so I think I don't think there's any question of today, we've moved on from the question of is it an if, it's how much is the question, and how, so the all about risk reduction, all about threat surface reduction, all about, security aspects of it, all about, complying with obviously all the compliance, compliance that pays. And in the end, the trust, the biggest amount, so how does it translate to the business speak? The business speak is how do your customers trust you, and how do you retain? We have 99% of retention from a customer angle standpoint. So it's not because we cannot be replaced. That's not, our solution can be replaced easily if our customers wanted to, but because they trust us. We have not, when we went global, for example, we've not asked a single permission from a single client to go ask, to do more than what they have permitted us to do. So that's another metric. So our retention is a metric, our growth is a metric, and our trust is a metric, and like our clients generally are very happy with the way we've approached it. If you look at all of our competition, except Zealous, everybody has approached them for something or the other that is beyond their comfort level. We have not. So that's another metric that we talk about. So it does pay, it does grow, and it does, and all about at the end of the day, we're all here to do like a job per se, but we all operate based on humanness and trust. And so like the more trust that we have and the more humanness that we have, the more business we will do, regardless of which company we are in.
That is true. Callie, thank you for sharing that. I would like to thank you, James, Gary, to join here us and sharing your experiences. I hope you like it, our conversation. I did a lot. And let's get to the next person in charge of the stage here. Thank you.
Thank you.